Everyone thought the lake was calm that morning. But beneath the glassy water, a storm was already building, one that would destroy my home, my peace, and every illusion I had about the people I called neighbors. The hum of heavy machinery broke the silence before sunrise. My phone lit up with motion alerts. Cameras along the dock caught the glint of metal teeth under the first gray light, an excavator's arm rising like a predator ready to strike. And at the center of it all stood Victoria Wallace, smiling, clapping, watching my $2 million lakefront lodge about to be reduced to rubble. Victoria, the self-appointed queen of our HOA, loved to play God with other people's lives. Former marketing executive, 48 years old, always carrying a clipboard like it was a royal scepter. She ran Aurora Springs as her own personal brand, obsessing over aesthetic perfection. Solar panels? Too modern. LED lighting? Too harsh. Satellite dish? An eyesore. And my lodge? To her, it was a digital monstrosity in the middle of her carefully curated postcard. But this wasn't just petty neighbor drama. This was a war. And Victoria had no idea she'd picked the wrong target. 6 months earlier, I'd moved here to escape. I'm Alex Rivera, former NSA contractor turned cybersecurity engineer. After my mother died from carbon monoxide poisoning, I needed space to breathe. The lodge wasn't just real estate. It was my sanctuary, a place where I could work remotely, heal and keep her memory alive. I'd poured everything into it. Not just money, but love. Solar panels to keep it self-sustaining, Starlink internet for flawless connectivity, a security grid that would make a government facility jealous. And my favorite part, a memorial garden for my mother, where her roses bloomed under the care of a smart irrigation system. Every upgrade had a purpose. Every line of code in my home automation was written by me. From the day I moved in, Victoria made her mission clear. Strip my home of anything she deemed ugly or disruptive. She created a Facebook group dedicated to shaming my property, posting photos daily like she was documenting war crimes. She accused my security cameras of spying on neighbors, claimed my solar panels ruined the historical look, even suggested my LED path lights were offensive to the night sky. Her obsession didn't feel random, and I was trained to follow my instincts. I started digging, quietly, monitoring network traffic, tracking suspicious login attempts. That's when I caught the first real scent of something bigger, a series of unauthorized access attempts to the city's planning database. The source? A local IP address? The geolocation? Victoria's own house? The deeper I went, the uglier it got. She wasn't just ranting on Facebook. She'd hired a digital marketing consultant who ran bot farms across 3 states. Fake accounts posted negative reviews about my property, coordinated on neighborhood forums, and harassed me across multiple platforms. The digital fingerprints told the story. This was a professional operation. And then I found the financials. Through a public records request, I pulled HOA expense reports and saw an $85,000 payment to something called Community Digital Enhancement Services. Buried in the line items, $35K for reputation management, $25K for community engagement platforms, and another $25K for security consulting. All euphemisms for digital manipulation. It wasn't just me she was after. 12 other families in Aurora Springs had already been driven to sell after relentless harassment campaigns. Their properties were scooped up below market value by the same investment groups, shell companies that existed only on paper. It hit me like a gut punch. This wasn't about landscaping rules. It was a coordinated land grab. That's when I decided I wouldn't just defend myself, I'd dismantle her entire network. I hardened my home security like a fortress. Layered defense grids, motion sensors, automated lighting sequences, backups for every backup. My NSA training had taught me that when someone escalates, they escalate hard. And Victoria, she was just getting started. That's when Dylan came into the picture, a 17-year-old neighbor with a TikTok account and a grudge of his own. Victoria had targeted his family for ridiculous violations. Too many deliveries, the wrong kind of porch lights, even accusing them of excessive ring light usage. Dylan knew how to make a story go viral, and I had the technical firepower. Together, we formed an unlikely alliance. Our plan was simple: collect evidence, control the narrative, and hit back where it hurt most. her public image. Dylan started a TikTok series, HOA Karen vs. Tech Bro, breaking down her manipulations in short, savage clips. The hashtags Troy HOA Gate and Berkshire Digital Dictator started trending locally. Meanwhile, I kept tracking her bot networks, infiltrating her fake accounts, and archiving every digital footprint. But the turning point came one night at 11:47 p.m. My intrusion detection system went off, an unauthorized access attempt to my network coming from a device logged into the HOA's private systems. The signal trace? Victoria's tablet. And that was the moment I realized she wasn't going to stop at harassment. She was going to destroy me. The sound of engines shattered the morning calm. By the time I made it to the window, the excavator's bucket was already poised above my roofline like an executioner's blade. And there she was. Victoria, standing in front of the machine with a microphone in one hand and a smug little wave for the neighbors. She looked like she was hosting a parade, and except the main attraction was the destruction of my home. Emergency structural hazard removal, her banners read. It was a lie so bold it almost felt comical. But I didn't laugh. I recorded every second, every infraction, every timestamp. Because while she thought she was winning, she had just walked into the tightest legal trap I'd ever set. The fake emergency order she waved around, it carried a watermark I'd planted weeks earlier, one that revealed a counterfeit seal under magnification. The demolition itself? A violation of at least half a dozen HOA and state regulations, no 48-hour notice, no 2/3 resident approval, no authorized safety supervision, and, my personal favorite, a blatant breach of the quiet hours. Victoria herself had championed the year before. By my calculations, those fines weren't just going to sting, they were going to bleed. A paddleboarder out on the lake filmed the whole thing from start to finish. The tarp-covered contractor, logo, the crooked signage, the very moment my mother's memorial garden crumbled under the excavator's treads. That footage would later play on a federal courtroom screen. But in that moment, watching it happen live, I felt something shift inside me. This wasn't about property anymore. It was about dignity. About not letting someone like Victoria turn my life into her spectacle and walk away untouched. By nightfall, the community room was packed for an emergency HOA meeting. I'd never seen so many people in one place, phones glowing in their hands, the air buzzing with quiet outrage. The divide was visible. On one side, Victoria's clipboard loyalists. On the other, residents tired of being bullied. Victoria started her presentation like she was unveiling a public health crisis. Cybersecurity threats in our community, the first slide read, complete with graphs that looked pulled from a conspiracy blog. She pointed at pictures of my lodge, calling it a surveillance fortress, warning that my equipment could spy on residents. Her lawyer sat nearby, nodding gravely, lending an air of legitimacy to every false word. I let her go on for a full 10 minutes before I stood. Then I connected my laptop to the projector. What happened next changed the temperature of that room. Instantly, on the screen, real-time intrusion attempts, all coming from inside the building, from Victoria's tablet. Gasps rippled through the audience as they watched her device trying to access other residents' home networks. I didn't have to say a word about hypocrisy. It was written on every stunned face in the room. Then I dropped the bigger bomb. The servers of Community Digital Enhancement Services, the very company she'd funneled HOA money into, had been cracked wide open 2 hours earlier. On the screen, I displayed their client list. 47 HOAs across 12 states, each running identical manipulation campaigns. There it was in black and white. Services like community consensus manufacturing, neighbor surveillance packages, and property devaluation tactics. The payment history showed Victoria had spent $340,000 over 3 years targeting 23 residents here in Aurora Springs, and then came the treble damages calculation. I showed the numbers, clear and undeniable. $650,000 in damages, multiplied by 3 under civil statute. $1,950,000 owed. You could feel the air leave the room. Even her staunchest allies glanced away from her, as if afraid to catch the blast of whatever came next. The whispers began. Someone in the back muttered, That's my name in the files. Another gasped at the discovery of hidden surveillance cameras, blackmail dossiers, and data collection on residents' private schedules. The room wasn't hers anymore. It was mine. But as I scanned the audience, I noticed her. Victoria, stiff in her chair, eyes locked on her phone. She was texting. And I recognized the contact name from the hacked database. 2 words kept flashing in my mind. Emergency Protocol Alpha. It was a term I'd seen buried deep in the files, labeled for operations exposure. I didn't know exactly what it meant. But judging by the sudden, frantic pace of her typing, I knew it wasn't going to be good. 17 minutes after she walked out of that meeting, the first alert hit my security system. Motion sensors tripped at my front gate, license plate readers identified 2 unmarked SUVs, and then they stepped out. 6 figures in black tactical gear, shields up, badges reading, Digital Crimes Enforcement Unit, Aurora Springs Division. Except, there was no such unit. That was when I realized exactly what Emergency Protocol Alpha was, and it was standing on my lawn. The first man out of the SUV moved like he'd rehearsed the role 100 times. Black helmet, visor down, a composite shield with a printed badge so new it still smelled like fresh plastic. But I'd seen enough real tactical units in my NSA. Days to know the difference. These weren't law enforcement. They were actors. Emergency Protocol Alpha, Victoria's final play, had just arrived. I stayed inside, letting the defense grid do exactly what I'd designed it to do. 4,000 Kelvin floodlights lit up the driveway, blinding them in an instant. Hidden cameras locked on from multiple angles, feeding live footage to my secure cloud. Encrypted alerts pinged my network of allies. Dylan's phone lit up too. He was already setting up his live stream. Through the speakers, I triggered a calm, neutral voice. This property is under federal surveillance. All actions are being recorded. It made them hesitate. Good. My network monitoring kicked into overdrive, scanning their radios. The encryption was laughable, consumer grade at best. Within seconds, I was inside their comms, listening to a voice I knew too well. Victoria. She was parked 2 blocks away, feeding them instructions like a movie director. Approach the door. Look authoritative. Don't engage unless provoked. Her voice trembled just enough to betray nerves. My security AI cross-referenced the so-called Digital Crimes Enforcement insignia. Nothing matched in any law enforcement database. Facial recognition scanned each officer, pulling social media profiles. 4 were freelance actors from Denver. 1 did birthday parties as a stormtrooper. The team leader had a LinkedIn page offering corporate event security. This was intimidation theater, and she thought I'd buy a ticket. I opened a fake server, a honeypot, just for them. On their tablets, it looked like my home network. In reality, every keystroke they made was feeding me their location, passwords, and Victoria's burner phone number. Within minutes, I had the full payment trail, $5,000 each, wired through a shell company with a $20,000 bonus to the coordinator. Outside, the leader raised his megaphone. Open the door, Mr. Rivera. We're here on a digital crimes investigation. Perfect. Toggled the intercom. Funny. The county records say there's no such division. Would you like to explain that to the real police? They're on their way. One of them shifted nervously. Another glanced at the SUVs. The performance was already cracking. Dylan's live stream was climbing past 20,000 viewers. Comments flooded in. That's not real SWAT gear. Look at the badges, they're 3D printed. Is this a HOA hit squad? The hashtags fake SWAT and HOA criminal were exploding across Twitter. That's when my neighbor Rosa called from her porch, her voice carrying across the night. Alex, the sheriff's department is on the line. They're 3 minutes out. Victoria's voice on the comms went sharp. Abort. Repeat. Abort. Get out of there now. But it was too late. The first cruiser rolled up with lights flashing, blocking the street. The real officer stepped out, scanning the scene. In less than 60 seconds, they spotted everything wrong. The off-brand tactical vests, the unregistered plates, the fact that no digital crimes enforcement unit existed anywhere in the state of Colorado. One officer's Body cam caught the moment he asked for credentials. The leader hesitated, then mumbled something about an anonymous tip. The cop raised an eyebrow. An anonymous tip? That brought you here in fake uniforms? The dominoes fell fast after that. The actors caved, spilling everything. They'd been hired through an event services agency, told it was a training. Simulation. Payment receipts pointed straight to Victoria's shell company. And the final nail? Audio of her giving them commands. Intercepted, recorded, and already uploaded to 3 separate secure servers. Her voice was crystal clear. Abhor. Delete everything. Pay them to disappear. Within the hour, the SUVs were impounded, the actors taken in for questioning, and my evidence package, photos, video, intercepted comms, payment logs, was in the hands of both local police and the FBI's cyber crimes unit. But here's the thing about a scheme like Victoria's. When you pull one thread, the whole web starts to unravel. By dawn, federal interest had been triggered. Wire fraud, conspiracy, impersonating law enforcement. And thanks to the bot farms and property devaluation campaigns I documented, potential RICO charges, Community Digital Enhancement Services, her hired manipulation machine, went dark overnight. Servers seized, bank accounts frozen, and in the middle of it all, Victoria vanished from her home, leaving behind shredded documents and a half-packed suitcase. She thought she was running. I knew she was just circling the drain, because I still had one more card to play. The master file I'd pulled from her servers, the one labeled Aurora Springs Protocol. And that file? It wasn't just about me. It was about every single person she'd ever targeted. The knock on my door came at 7:12 a.m., crisp, deliberate, and nothing like the pounding from Victoria's fake enforcers. When I opened it, 2 FBI cybercrime agents stood there, badges in hand. Behind them, an unmarked van idled quietly, antenna arrays reaching into the pale morning sky. They weren't here for me, they were here for the evidence. By then, I'd already compiled everything into a single, air-gapped drive: payment trails, bot network maps, surveillance files, and the recordings of Victoria directing her little theater troupe in tactical cosplay. I handed it over without a word. The lead agent glanced at me with something between respect and disbelief. "You just did our job for us," he said. But that was only part of it. Because the master file I'd pulled, Aurora Springs Protocol, was a roadmap. It didn't just list my property. It had names, dozens of them. Every family Victoria's network had targeted, every campaign they'd run, and the shell companies they'd used to scoop up the properties. It read like the ledger of a real estate cartel wearing an HOA's face. Noon, the community knew. Word spread fast. Residents crammed into the community hall, buzzing with the shock of betrayal. People clutched printouts of their own files, some with photographs taken through their windows, others with notes about vulnerabilities, illnesses, debts, family disputes, all logged for exploitation. I'd never seen neighbors look like that before. Anger, yes, but something deeper. That sinking feeling when you realize the smiling person who waved at you every morning had been quietly sharpening the knife. Victoria didn't show up. Her allies didn't either. But the board was still there, the ones who'd signed off. On the payments, pretending they had no idea what the money was for, they didn't have much to say after I connected my laptop to the projector. On screen, the financial flowcharts, tracing $340,000 from our HOA account into Community Digital Enhancement Services, then into Property Acquisition LLCs. The room was dead silent when I showed the development plans, the real reason for all of this. Luxury condos, high-density retail. Our quiet lakeside neighborhood turned into a glossy resort for people who'd never even live here. And that's when I explained the legal hook, the treble damages clause buried deep in the HOA bylaws. They hadn't just broken the rules. They'd done it willfully. The demolition of my lodge, that was $650,000 in damages. Multiply it by 3 under state statute, and suddenly the HOA owed me $1,950,000. And that was before counting the dozen other families who'd been forced out. It was like watching a tide turn. The same people who'd avoided my eye in grocery. Store aisles were now walking up, shaking my hand, asking what they could do to help. Dylan was in the back, phone in hand, streaming the whole thing. His viewer count ticked upward in real time, 10,000, 15,000, 20,000. Hashtags Shock Your HOA Gate and Karen Exposed were trending regionally. And then, just when I thought I'd seen it all, Rosa Martinez, 72 years old, retired court clerk, stood up from her seat. "Enough," she said, her voice steady. "I move that we remove the entire board, effective immediately." The vote wasn't even close. In less than 10 minutes, the leadership that had run this place for years was gone. Rosa was appointed emergency administrator, with full authority to freeze accounts and open the books. She didn't waste a second, but the real firestorm wasn't happening in our meeting hall. It was happening across the state. By evening, local news was running the story. HOA president implicated in fake SWAT incident, cyber manipulation campaign. Footage of Victoria clapping at my demolition played side by side with the body cam clips from the fake raid. It was a public relations death spiral, and Dylan's clips were gasoline on the fire. That night, my security alerts lit up again, not with an attack, but with something far stranger. The servers for community digital enhancement services had gone completely dark. Payment processors had frozen their accounts. And someone, somewhere, had started scrubbing every trace of their existence from the web. The FBI agents I'd met that morning, they were still in town, and they were moving fast. At 5:43 a.m., they executed a federal search warrant on Victoria's home. What they found would fill court exhibits for months: hard drives, burner phones, shredded documents, and one last encrypted laptop. But by the time the agents finished cataloging everything, one fact was clear. This wasn't just Victoria, Aurora. Springs was one node in a network spanning dozens of communities in multiple states. And the people behind it? They were bigger, richer, and far more dangerous than a clipboard queen with an Instagram feed. By the time the sun rose the next day, Aurora Springs wasn't just a neighborhood anymore. It was a crime scene. Federal agents moved in like a tide. Unmarked vans, satellite uplinks, evidence teams in gloves and boot covers. The HOA's offices were stripped bare. Every file, every laptop, every scrap of paper boxed and tagged. Residents watched from their porches, some filming, some just standing with arms crossed, trying to process the reality. The people we'd trusted to manage our community had been running it like a criminal enterprise. Inside the temporary FBI field office set up in the old community center, I was sitting across from Special Agent Claire Donovan, a woman with the kind of calm that comes from having seen too many people think they were untouchable. She slid the Aurora Springs protocol file across the table. "This," she said, "is bigger than you think." I'd already suspected it, but when she opened the full map, my chest tightened. Aurora Springs wasn't alone. It was one of 327 HOAs across 23 states running the same blueprint. Coordinated digital harassment, property devaluation, forced sales, all funneling into the same shadow network of shell companies. The dollar figure at the bottom made my stomach turn. $47 million in stolen property value, and it hadn't stopped. There were active campaigns underway, targeting families right now. Dylan sat next to me, eyes wide, his phone buzzing every few seconds with new messages. His videos had gone viral overnight. Millions of views, requests for interviews, hashtags spilling into mainstream news feeds. He was no longer just a kid with a TikTok account. He was the face of a grassroots digital uprising. But fame came with risk. And Claire made it clear, if we were going to keep pushing, we had to protect ourselves. The people funding this operation weren't HOA presidents with clipboards. They were investors with political connections, corporate fronts, and overseas accounts. The FBI was moving on them, but building airtight cases took time. In the meantime, we had something the feds didn't: the court of public opinion. That night, Dylan and I launched a joint stream. Him from his bedroom, me from my temporary setup in the barn. We broke down the scam in simple terms: how bot farms work, how fake community consensus gets manufactured, how property rights can be stolen without ever breaking into a house. We didn't just tell our story, we told everyone's names. With permission. Of families who'd been forced out. Screenshots of the harassment they'd endured. Before and after photos of properties stripped down and flipped into profit machines. The comment section exploded. Thousands of people were realizing they'd seen the same tactics in their own neighborhoods. By morning, we had over 200 emails from residents across the country asking how to fight back. That's when Rosa stepped in. She might not have had my tech skills or Dylan's online reach, but she understood procedure, how to turn outrage into action. She drafted a standardized complaint packet, complete with legal citations, evidence templates, and instructions for filing with state attorneys. General, we put it online for free. Within a week, over 3,000 people had downloaded it, and the hits kept coming. The FBI traced Victoria's payments to a Cayman Islands account, only to find it had already been seized, not by her, but by a federal freeze order. She'd tried to wire $2.3 million. Out of the country in the early hours after the fake SWAT fiasco, she hadn't realized she was already under surveillance. When the agents finally brought her in, the image hit the news cycle like a thunderclap. Victoria, in handcuffs, being led down the courthouse steps. The charges were staggering. Wire fraud, conspiracy, identity theft, impersonating law enforcement. And thanks to the scope of the operation, RICO, the same statute used to take down mob bosses, her bail hearing was short. The judge took one look at the evidence and denied it. She was going to stay right where she was until trial. But for every victory, a new threat emerged, because buried in the encrypted data I'd pulled from her servers was a phrase I hadn't paid much attention to before. Phase 2. Deployment. When I finally cracked the last layer of encryption, the scale hit me like a gut punch. Aurora Springs had been a test run. There was a list of 2,847 communities flagged for optimization over the next decade. Coordinated property control on a national scale, with deeper tech, bigger budgets, and political cover. And the people at the top? They were still out there. The first thing I learned about Phase 2 was that it didn't look like war. It looked like routine paperwork. A zoning amendment here, a bylaw revision there, social media chatter about modernizing communities. If you didn't know what you were looking at, you'd miss it entirely. But once I'd mapped the signatures, the phrasing, the formatting, the identical email templates, I saw it for what it was. The same playbook that had gutted Aurora Springs. Quietly. Taking root across the country. The FBI called it a distributed infiltration model. I called it what it was. Corporate colonization with a friendly HOA smile. This time, though, we weren't just reacting. We were building something bigger than one neighborhood's defense. It started in Rosa's kitchen. The three of us huddled, over mugs of coffee, laptops open, planning a network we called the Community Shield. The idea was simple: connect targeted neighborhoods before the harassment began, share playbooks, defensive software, legal resources, and, most importantly, real stories. By the end of the first week, we had 50 communities signed on. By the end of the month, 300. Dylan handled the front line. His videos breaking down the scams into punchy, shareable clips that spread faster than the manipulation campaigns themselves. Rosa ran the legal arm, helping communities draft their own bylaws to block shell company takeovers. And me? I was the ghost in the wires, scanning for bot networks, tracing domain registrations, quietly feeding intel to federal task forces. The Bureau wasn't used to having civilians in the loop, but Claire Donovan understood the stakes. She set up a secure line between my system and the FBI's cyber unit. If I caught a new bot swarm or phishing push, they could hit it before it rooted in. It didn't take long for the enemy to notice. 2 weeks after we went live, my firewall logged an intrusion attempt unlike anything I'd seen before. AI-generated. Attack patterns, shifting every 3 seconds, probing for weaknesses. This wasn't Victoria's amateur hour anymore. This was professional, well-funded, and relentless. Phase 2 had begun. We fought it in layers. Level 1, automated countermeasures, honeypots, data poisoning, spoofed vulnerabilities to keep them busy while I tracked their origin. Level 2, narrative warfare. Dylan pushing counter content that reached the same platforms they were using, exposing their tactics in real time. Level 3, law. Rosa coordinating rapid legal responses, filing injunctions before the harassment could escalate into forced sales. But they weren't just coming for communities. They were coming for us. One night at 2:14 a.m., my intrusion alarms went off. Not digital this time. Physical. Motion sensors in the garden. I pulled up the camera feed and saw 3 silhouettes moving along the fence line. No uniforms, no tools. Just slow, deliberate pacing. I triggered the floodlights. They froze. I didn't have to open the door to know they were probing for intimidation value, a callback to the fake SWAT stunt, but subtler. They didn't speak, didn't run, just stared at the cameras before slipping back into the trees. An hour later, Dylan texted me a screenshot. His parents had received an anonymous email threatening to pull the plug on his videos. They wanted us scared. Instead, we went louder. The pie. Next morning, Dylan posted the fence footage with the caption, "They came to our houses last night. This is why we fight." It blew up instantly. Over 1 million views in 24 hours. The comments section wasn't sympathy. It was rage, and rage is hard to control. Within days, the Community Shield had doubled its membership. People wanted in. Tech workers, lawyers, retirees, veterans, even some former HOA board members who admitted they'd been manipulated into compliance joined the cause. Claire called it civilian counterintelligence. I called it the only reason Phase 2 wasn't steamrolling the country. Still, the data I was seeing scared me. The new bot farms weren't just seeding fake posts anymore. They were generating deepfake evidence, doctored security footage, forged violation notices, even fabricated 911 call logs. If you didn't have the tools to verify, you'd swear they were real. One community in Arizona nearly voted to evict a homeowner based on a deepfake video showing him vandalizing common property. We intercepted the clip hours before the meeting, proved it was AI generated, and turned the evidence over to the FBI. Without that catch, another family would have been gone. Another property flipped to the network. But the closer we got to disrupting Phase 2, the closer they got to us. Claire warned me that my name had appeared in internal chatter from their encrypted comms. Chatter the feds had only partially cracked. They were debating whether to neutralize me before the next wave launched. I'd lived with pressure before. But this was different. This wasn't just my lodge anymore. This was thousands of people counting on us to keep their homes safe, and then the encrypted drop came in. A whistleblower, or someone pretending to be one, sent a file labeled Reset Master Schedule. The target list was massive. 50,000 communities flagged for conversion over the next 5 years. Aurora. Springs wasn't a victory to them, it was a delay. The Reset Master Schedule wasn't just a hit list, it was a countdown. Each community had a launch date, the day their harassment campaign would begin, their bylaws rewritten, their property values gutted, and scattered throughout the spreadsheet were code names I didn't recognize. Claire did. "They're not just targeting HOAs," she said, her tone clipped. "Some of these are municipal planning committees, school boards, utility co-ops." It hit me like a gut punch. This wasn't just about houses anymore. Phase 2 was a blueprint for controlling entire local economies, and every vote that shaped them. The FBI was moving, but federal machinery grinds slow. The people behind this had money, political insulation, and lawyers who could bury subpoenas. In red tape for years, we didn't have years. The Community Shield secure channel lit up with urgent pings. Members in Texas, Florida, and Oregon reported identical harassment patterns, fake code violations, deepfake incident footage, bot swarm neighborhood posts. In one town, a city council member's voice had been cloned to announce a zoning change that would hand public land to a developer. The tech was evolving faster than the law. We decided to do something risky. Take the fight outside our borders. Through one of Claire's international contacts, we linked with cybersecurity, cells in Canada, the UK, and Australia, all of them reporting eerily similar campaigns. Same bot architecture, same shell company chains, same AI deepfake infrastructure. It was global, and they were adapting to us. 2 nights after the Alliance call, we were hit with the largest DDoS attack I'd ever seen. 500 million requests a minute slamming into the Community Shield's network. Servers across 3 countries buckled. For a moment, I thought we were done. But the open source tools we'd built, the ones we'd shared freely with every community in the network, came online like a chain reaction. Shield nodes rerouted traffic, isolated infected segments, and fought back with counter-swarming AI. We stayed up all night, our screens glowing in dark rooms, voices hoarse from hours on the secure line. By dawn, the attack was over. We'd held, but the message was clear. They could reach us anywhere. The paranoia crept in fast. We started running double verification checks on every call. Dylan's team used two-step visual confirmations for every meeting. Rosa insisted we meet in person. For key planning sessions, phones left in Faraday bags to block tracking, and still, there were breaches. In early March, one of our Shield leads in Michigan was swatted. A fake 911 call reporting an armed standoff at his home. Local police rolled in full tactical gear. The only reason he wasn't shot was because we'd warned him weeks earlier that this was one of their intimidation tactics. It wasn't a mistake. It was a warning. For me, the breaking point came when my own systems flagged an inbound connection from inside the FBI's network. It looked like a legitimate data request from Claire's unit, except Claire had been in the air, flying to a conference. I traced it back to a compromised contractor account. Someone had been inside the Bureau's systems, hunting for Shield intel, and then the chatter hit the secure feed. They weren't just planning Phase 2 anymore. They were planning a total network blackout. The operation's name was Project Null. The strategy was brutal in its simplicity. Deploy ransomware to every community tech system tied to the Shield. Lock it all at once. Demand compliance in exchange for restoration. One keystroke and thousands of neighborhoods would go blind. We didn't have the luxury of waiting for warrants or press releases. In a single night, we pulled every Shield-connected community into an emergency war room, a digital triage center where techs, lawyers, and activists worked side by side. Systems were patched, backups triple encrypted, decoys planted, and then silence. For 72 hours, nothing happened. It was worse than the attack itself, that feeling of holding your breath, knowing the punch is coming but not knowing from where. Then, on the fourth night, one of my monitors lit up with a pattern I recognized immediately. Inbound traffic from a dormant IP block in Eastern Europe, masked through 6 layers of proxies. The ransomware payload was live. We had seconds. I deployed the kill switch we'd been saving, a network-level quarantine that cut every Shield node off from external traffic in under 3 seconds. The payload never reached its targets. But the retaliation was immediate. Dylan's feed went dark midstream. Rosa's email was flooded with legal threats from a law firm tied to one of the shell companies. My own financial monitoring flagged a $5 attempt to access my accounts. A small probe, but one that meant they were testing my personal defenses now. They weren't giving up, and I knew the next move wouldn't come from behind a keyboard. I felt it before I saw it. That subtle shift in the air, the kind you only notice when you've lived with threats for months. The hum of my security grid was steady, but the silence outside was wrong, too complete, too still. Then, motion alerts. 3. SUVs, no plates, rolling slow up the hill toward my rebuilt lodge. This time I didn't wait for them to park. Floodlights snapped on. Hidden cameras blinked to life. Every angle streamed to the FBI, the Shield core team, and 3 separate news outlets who'd agreed to go live if anything happened to me. The doors opened. Not actors this time. Real muscle, private security, and high-end tactical gear, the kind corporations hire when they want intimidation without fingerprints. The man in front spoke into an earpiece, then called out, "We're here for a conversation." Stayed behind the glass. "Then you can have it with my lawyer, or the FBI. They're both listening right now." He didn't flinch, just stepped closer. "You've made enemies, Rivera. Powerful ones. Phase 2 is dead because of you. But Project HOA Reset? That's bigger than you can imagine. Walk away. You'll live longer." His tone was calm, almost casual. That made it worse. I didn't answer. Instead, I triggered the countermeasure we'd been testing for months, a localized EMP burst. It wouldn't touch the lodge's shielded systems, but outside, their radios died, their GPS units blanked, their vehicle ignitions locked. The look on his face told me he hadn't expected that. From the driveway, Dylan's drone descended, camera pointed straight at them. His stream went live within seconds, thousands of viewers watching in real time. Rosa's voice came through my secure line. "Sheriff's 3 minutes out. They left in 2. Not a word, not a threat. Just a silent retreat down the hill. The SUVs rolling without headlights until they were gone." Claire called 20 minutes later. "They're feeling the pressure. We've got a federal warrant package ready to hit the upper management, the investors, the shell company directors, everyone Victoria ever reported to." That's when she told me. Victoria had flipped. From inside her federal cell, she'd agreed to cooperate, trading intelligence for a reduced sentence. The data she handed over tied the operations funding to offshore accounts, political contributions, even partnerships with legitimate corporations who'd had no idea their platforms were being weaponized. It was enough to trigger a multi-agency raid in 8 countries. One morning, almost exactly a year after the demolition of my lodge, I stood in my mother's memorial garden, phone in hand, watching the news break. 47 arrested in largest cyber manipulation conspiracy in history. The footage was surreal. Boardrooms emptied, servers seized, entire property management companies shuttered overnight. Aurora Springs was no longer just a victory story. It was a case study, the model for how communities could fight back and win, but the victory didn't feel clean. For every network we dismantled, there was another waiting in the shadows. Technology kept evolving, and with it, the methods of manipulation. Claire called it whack-a-mole at a national scale. Dylan called it Season 2. I just called it unfinished business. That night, the Digital Democracy Festival lit up the lakeshore, our first since the rebuild. Kids ran from booth to booth learning about cyber safety through games. Seniors navigated new community tablets with confidence thanks to Rosa's classes. The rebuilt lodge behind me wasn't just my home. It was now the central node of the Shield, housing servers, and secure comms for over 1,000 communities. Dylan took the stage first, announcing he'd been accepted into MIT's graduate digital rights program. The crowd roared, but he just grinned and said, "Not yet, I've got a year of fieldwork to finish first." Rosa followed, now a city councilwoman, talking about participatory budgeting and the laws we'd helped pass in 12 states. Her voice carried over the water, proud and steady. "Democracy works," she said, "when communities work together." When it was my turn, I kept it short. I told them my mother had believed in 2 things: that technology should serve people, and that bullies only win when good people stay silent. We'd proven both could be true. But even as the applause rose, my secure terminal pinged. An encrypted message, routed through 5 anonymizing nodes, appearing on every Shield admin's screen at once. The Aurora Springs model inspired us. But new tools require new battles. What happened in your community was local. What happens next will be planetary. Attached was a single file name, Quantum Dawn. Closed my laptop slowly, the noise of the festival fading into the background. We'd won this round, but the war was just beginning.